And finally this evening, 150 years ago this weekend, 244 men, women and children were evicted from their homes in Derryveagh in County Donegal. The landlord replaced them with sheep. Among those commemorating the event today were two women who travelled from Australia, direct descendants of one of those who lost their home.
3 devastating days in April 1861. An entire community was destroyed. 200 constables systematically evicted 47 families from their homes in Derryveagh on behalf of their landlord, John George Adair.
They were evicted because John George Adair actually wanted to take over the land, and sheep at the time were more profitable than the people. It was a complete wipeout of a community that was very close-knit and a community that could have continued on here, and it's actually a ghostly place.
Some of those evicted ended up in the workhouse, but 150 of them emigrated to Australia, their passage paid for by Irish people out there so concerned by their plight. And among those who sailed to Sydney was Catherine Ward. 150 years on, Catherine's 2 great-granddaughters came from Australia to see the remains of the home she had left behind.
She was an Irish speaker, but when she got to Australia, she met and married a German man. So I don't know how they managed to do that. And then within about 20 years, they'd actually moved to Melbourne and they owned a hotel.
Incredibly emotional to think that this is where this all happened, 5 generations ago. In such a small area and so desolate, and it must have been a shocking existence, and how sad that it happened, thrown out with nothing. But hopefully them coming to Australia, their life obviously was better.
One happy ending to a tragic story. Eileen Magner, RTE News, Derry.
Hi, I'm here in the Derryveagh area, the area that back in 1861, 244 people were forced out of their homes. So while this is an interesting and tragic story, what's the connection with deaf history? Well, the story says that 244 people were evicted, but that then the landlord arrived at a house with 2 deaf siblings, a brother and sister named Bradley, were living, John and Fanny Bradley. And when the landlord arrived and discovered that they were deaf, he said that it was okay that they could stay. So whereas all of the hearing people in the area were evicted or forced to come back but not allowed to farm their land, the deaf brother and sister were allowed to stay. Now there is a story that's been passed down in the area that when the landlord arrived at the deaf brother and sister's house, he said, "The mark of God is on this house, and I will go no further." And so the Bradleys were allowed to stay. So what happened after this? Well, the Bradleys were allowed to remain in their house, but the brother of John, Patrick, was forced out of his house. Now him and his family managed to move in with a neighbour. But Patrick's son, Francis, a couple of years after the evictions, was brought to court, accused of killing another man whose name was Adam Grierson. And Grierson worked for the landlord. So the Bradleys were obviously very bitter against the landlord and his staff, and the accusation was that Francis Bradley had tried to kill him. But in court, despite having a full trial 3 times, each time the trial collapsed and Francis Bradley was allowed to walk free. And the reason why is because the juries in all 3 trials could not come to a unanimous decision about whether Bradley was guilty or not. And so each time, the Crown prosecution was lost. Now, Francis Bradley at one stage lived with the deaf brother and sister, and also Grierson lived with the Bradleys as well. And you'll see the Bradleys, John and Fanny's name, crop up in the newspaper coverage of these murder trials. Fanny, the deaf sister, died sometime in the 1870s, and John died later in 1885. But the ruin of their house can still be seen to this day. The area that I'm standing in is called Maharashangan, and that's within the wider Derryveagh area up here in County Donegal. So it's quite remote. You have to go through some very narrow, twisty roads to get here. And over to my right, you can see a ruined house. It hasn't been lived in for a while, but this is where the deaf brother and sister lived. This is their house. So the story about Derryveagh is, of course, that 224 people were forced out of their homes, evicted. The area was depopulated, and the tenants were replaced with sheep. But the deaf brother and sister that lived in this house were allowed to stay. And they lived there for many more years afterwards, dying later. Fanny, the sister, dying in the 1860s or 1870s. And then the brother, John Bradley, died in 1885. And their house is still to be seen. So I've driven here today looking to see this ruined house. But what's really interesting is that when I climbed over the fence into the actual house, there is a plaque on one of the walls. It was erected in 1990 by Antashka. And the plaque is there to commemorate those who were evicted back in 1861 in this area of Derryveagh. So this plaque is in the house where the deaf brother and sister lived. But what's really interesting is that the newspaper reports talk about this house being actually two houses under one roof, with a dividing wall in between the two houses. And I can see that there is a dividing wall still in this ruined house. There isn't a way through this wall. You can see the remains of this thick wall between two different houses. Now the walls, of course, the level has come down and the stones are scattered everywhere. But you can see that one of the walls, the end walls, is still there, and that's where the plaque is located. To the sacred memory of the people of the Derryveagh eviction, April was the month of the shattered hearth, erected by Antashka Donegal Association 1990. So that's really interesting, but it's a pity in a way that it's overgrown with grass and shrubs here. It really should be cleaned up and cleared for people to come and visit the area, and not just for the deaf brother and sister's sake, for the Bradleys, but also for all the other tenants, the hearing tenants who were evicted so long ago from this area. So it's an interesting story.